Good morning, brothers and sisters, and a happy Feast of La Rose to everybody. Today is the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Times, and the readings are taken from Cycle A. Please stand as we join the choir in singing our entrance hymn. We have gathered here today, number 426, 426 in your hymnals.
We have gathered here today, both to listen and to pray. For the word of God is like a two-edged sword. We love you, Lord, we love you, Lord, we love you, Lord, we love you, Lord. Let us help each other more by word and deed. May this word of faith increase, may all strife and hatred cease. Send your healing light to us from up above. We love you, Lord, we love you, Lord, we love you, Lord, we love you, Lord. Let us help each other more by word and deed.
Good morning, sisters and brothers. Vive la Rose, my Rose. Vive la Rose encore. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous os, nous glorie. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous os, nous glorie. One more time. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous os, nous glorie. Vive la Rose. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous os, nous glorie. Vive la Rose encore. So today we celebrate in the Catholic Church the Feast of La Rose. Liturgically, universally, it was on the 23rd, but in St. Lucia, we maintain the tradition of the 30th of August, which is today, Tontaou. So vive la Rose, my La Rose. And we thank God for our language. We thank God for our culture, for our traditions, the values that we've inherited from our ancestors. We bring them all, using them to praise God and give thanks to God. Vive la Rose, my La Rose. And one of the things that La Rose does, it teaches you how to live with other people. Between La Rose and La Marguerite, there was warfare, but not military warfare. People can learn to live with each other. They can criticize each other, but in fun, in jest. No blood, no brutality, no violence. In a society like today, where we have got so much violence, we need to learn from these flowers how our guns can be toy guns. Our swords, wooden swords, said Derek Walcott. Vive la Rose, my La Rose. So let us begin our celebration now by looking into our own hearts, where we have all the violence, all the anger, all the resentment, all the hurts, the things that causes bloodshed in this country. La Rose and La Marguerite teaches us to get rid of those things. Let's ask God to cleanse our hearts now as we prepare to celebrate La Rose. And to you, my brothers and sisters, that I have gravely sinned in my thoughts and in my words, in what I have done and in what I have failed to do, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. Therefore I ask Blessed Mary, ever Virgin, all the angels and saints, and you, my brothers and sisters, to pray for me to the Lord our God. May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to life everlasting.
us all.
Let us now give glory to God.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will.
We bless you, we bless you, we adore you, we glorify heaven again. Oh God Almighty Father.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will.
Lord Jesus Christ, only begotten Son, Lord God, Lamb of God, Son of the Father, you take away the sins of the world, have mercy on us. You take away the sins of the world, receive our prayer. Your seated on the right hand of the Father, have mercy on us.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will.
You alone are the Holy One. You alone are the Lord. You alone are the Most High. The glory of God the Father.
Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good. Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to people of good will. Let us pray. O God, who set St. Rose of Lima on fire with your love, so that secluded from the world in the austerity of a life of penance, she might give herself to you alone. Grant, we pray, that through her intercession we may tread the paths of life on earth and drink at the streams of your delights in heaven. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever.
Amen.
Please sit. Our first reading is taken from the prophet Jeremiah, chapter 20, verses 7 to 9.
You have seduced me, Lord, and I have let myself be seduced. You have overpowered me. You were the stronger. I am a daily laughingstock, everybody's butts. Each time I speak the word, I have to howl and proclaim violence and ruin. The word of the Lord has meant for me insult, derision, all day long. I used to say, I will not think about him. I will not speak in his name anymore. Then there seemed to be a fire burning in my heart. imprisoned in my bones. The effort to restrain it wearied me. I could not bear it. The word of the Lord.
For you I long, my God.
For you my soul is thirsting. For you I long, my God.
For you my soul is thirsting. For you I long, my God. For you my soul is thirsting. For you I long, my God. O God, you are my God, for you I long. For you my soul is thirsting. My body pines for you, like a dry, weary land without water.
For
You, my soul is thirsting. For you I long,
my God.
So I gaze on you in the sanctuary, to see your truth and your glory. For your love is better than life. My lips will speak your praise. For you my soul is thirsting. For you I long, my God. So I will bless you all my life. In your name I will lift up my hands. My soul shall be filled as with a banquet. My mouth shall praise you with joy. For you my soul is
thirsting. For you I long, my God.
For you have been my help. In the shadow of your wings I rejoice. My soul clings to you. Your right hand holds me fast. For you my soul is thirsting. For you I long, my God.
Our second reading is taken from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, chapter 12, verses 1 to 2.
Think of God's mercy, my brothers, and worship him. I beg you, in a way that is worthy of thinking beings, by offering your living bodies as a holy sacrifice, truly pleasing to God. Do not model yourselves on the behavior of the world around you, but let your behavior change, modeled by your new mind. This is the only way to discover the will of God and know what is good, what it is that God wants, what is the perfect thing to do. The word of the Lord.
Please stand for the proclamation of the gospel.
Alleluia.
may the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ enlighten the eyes of our mind so that we can see what hope His call holds for us.
The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory be to you, Lord.
Jesus began to make it clear to the disciples that he was destined to go to Jerusalem and suffer grievously at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, to be put to death and to be raised up on the third day. Then, taking him aside, Peter started to remonstrate with him. "Heaven preserve you, Lord," he said. "This must not happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle in my path because the way you think is not God's way, but man's." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If anyone wants to be a follower of mine, let him renounce himself and take up his cross and follow me. For anyone who wants to save his life will lose it, but anyone who loses his life for my sake will find it. What, then, will a man gain if he wins the whole world and ruins his life? Or what has a man to offer in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man is going to come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and when he does, he will reward each one according to his behavior." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise the Lord Jesus Christ.
Remain standing for the Gospel in Creole. 22e dimanche en temps ordinaire, en lisant sorti horde l'Évangile selon Matthieu, chapitre 16, verset 21 jusqu'à 27. Jésus commençait à faire ses disciples à comprendre qu'il s'était destiné pour aller à Jérusalem, pour souffrir gravement, pour prendre la mort et puis pour ressusciter 3 jours après. À l'aide là, Peter Menaï à son côté pour remonstrer puis en disant, Seigneur, Dieu a préservé, ça pas si posé arriver. Mais Jésus tourne le dos à son Peter qui dit, allez-vous-en Satan, ou c'est un empêchement en ça fait moins. Parce que manière qu'a pensé à, c'est pas manière bon Dieu, mais manière les hommes. Jésus dit à ses disciples, si personne veut suivre moi, c'est faut y renoncer quoi, embrasser quoi et suivre moi. Parce que n'importe monde qui veut sauver la vie, qu'il perd lui. Mais tout ça qui perd la vie pour l'appétit moins, qu'il trouve. Qui gagne un monde ni si gagne toute la terre mais détruit la vie. Eh bien qui ça un monde ça offert comme boucantage pour la vie. Parce que les fils de l'homme qu'il vini en la gloire de Dieu avec tous ces anges-là. Et que là, il vini, il a récompensé chacun si la manière de comporter quoi. L'évangile du Seigneur, merci mon Dieu. Allez.
Please sit.
Vive la rose, la rose. Vive la rose encore. Today we join the church in the Archdiocese in celebrating the Fête la Rose. Unfortunately, we have to do it maintaining social distancing. So we cannot have the Guan and the Guan Fête as we normally would do. But still the spirit of la Rose we carry in our hearts. And we promote that spirit. Vive la rose, my la rose. Vive la rose encore. Now, it is very important for us to understand why we are celebrating our cultural traditions like la rose and la marguerite. These two flower festivals are our ancestors' way of celebrating their values. And they have lessons that they can teach us today, especially the way in which la Rose and la Marguerite conduct themselves. Vive la Rose, my la Rose. Notice what happens. You have two different groups that are rival groups. They are rival groups, yes. La Rose Cabaye, Marguerite Parole. Marguerite Cabaye, La Rose Parole. La Rose throwing words for Marguerite. Marguerite throwing words to La Rose. But they are all doing it in a spirit of togetherness, a spirit of community, a spirit of St. Lucianness. La Rose and La Marguerite all know that they are all St. Lucians together. And they are teaching the society how we must learn to live together. In our society today, we are torn by all kinds of divisions, particularly political divisions. We have politics one side here, we have politics over there, we have Labour there, we have UWP there. And the two groups don't know how to get on. La Rose and La Marguerite can teach us how to get on. They can teach us how we may be different, but we are united. Different, but united. We may disagree on policies, but we have a common good, the nation. We can learn that from La Rose and La Marguerite. That is why it's so important for us as Christians, for us to promote those Christian values, those good news that the La Rose and La Marguerite stand for. Because in our society today, there is a lot of bad news. Vive la Rose, my la Rose. Vive la Rose, my la Rose. There's a lot of bad news in our society. There's a lot of murders. There's violence. There's hatred. There are people who have anger in their hearts. And how do they manifest it? Blood. Blood. They cut people up. They shoot people. They kill people. That is not the way in which La Rose and La Marguerite deal. You know what kind of guns La Rose and La Marguerite have? Wooden guns. You know what swords they have? Wooden swords. In other words, they are non-violent. La Rose and La Marguerite are teaching us how as a society we can learn to be non-violent. We can disagree, but disagree in a Christian way, in a non-violent. Vive la Rose, my la Rose. And that is why the church has to promote those values. Because when we let the traditions die, those values die with them. And then everybody will say in society, oh boy, look at what's going on. What will do about crime? What will do about crime? Yeah, we don't know how to solve crime. Yes, learn from our ancestors. Learn from our traditions how to fight those contemporary society problems. We can learn from them. That is why it's important for us to celebrate Laos. Vive Laos, my Laos. And the beautiful thing is this. It is all done in a spirit of joy. Joy and celebration. Joy and celebration. And that is what we must learn to do. We have to learn to be a people who can rejoice and celebrate. Celebrate the beauty. You know that? This is the beauty. This is the beauty of Rose. The beauty. Celebrate beauty. Celebrate the beautiful thing in our country. The beautiful things about our people. That's what the Flower Festival teaches. Vive Laos, my Laos. And so, we have to reject all those values we get from America, we get from outside. All the selfishness, all the materialism, all the egocentrism, all the self-centeredness. These are values from outside. We have to reject those things and keep our own values where the person, the community, our society, helping one another, working with one another, coup de main, lending a hand to each other. Those are the values that La Rose and La Marguerite symbolize. Vive La Rose, my La Rose. And so, today, in all Catholic churches, I've been advocating that for years. Everybody should have a rose. Everybody should have come to church with a rose. And you should have been dressed in rose colors. And when Fête La Marguerite comes, the same thing too. Everybody should come in blue like Marguerite, with their Marguerite flowers, so that we can show the society that we understand the gospel values that are in our society. Vive Laos, my Laos. So sisters and brothers, do not reject the good things that we have, the good values that we have, what we learned from our ancestors. Do not reject it from the false values that are coming from outside. Let us reject violence that is from outside. Let us reject selfishness that is from outside. All the hatred and bitterness that's from outside. Let us learn from our people how we can live as community, as family, especially our children. You remember a long time in our families what happened? When children disagreed, our children will always disagree. Yes. And even when they fight with each other, what would happen? The parents would tell them, go and shake hands. Go and say, I'm sorry. Vive Laos, my Laos. Our homes were schools of conflict management. That's where the children learned how to live with each other. But we've abandoned that for false values from outside. That is why our society is the way it is. And people crying, oh, look at the violence. Oh, look about the violence. We have abandoned our family values. We've abandoned our local culture. We've abandoned those things that God gave us through our ancestors. That is why we are where we are at. So let us rediscover, as FRC says, découvrir Saint-Lucie, découvrir Cor. Rediscover who you are. Discover your values and celebrate them. Vive la rose, my la rose. Vive la rose encore. Amen. Let us stand. And let us profess that faith we have in the good news that can help to solve the problem of the bad news in the world. It is through the good news of Christ, the good news of love and community and family. That's how we overcome the violence and negativity. So let us profess that faith that we all share together. I believe in one God. I believe in one Lord Jesus Christ. For us man and for our salvation, he came down from heaven, and by the Holy Spirit was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. For our sake he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. He suffered death and was buried, and rose again on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures. He ascended into heaven.
And is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. I believe in
I believe in the Holy Spirit.
the Holy Catholic Church, who proceeds from the Father and the Son, who is the Father and the Son of God and God the Father, who has spoken through the prophets.
I believe in one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church. I confess one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. And I look forward to the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. Amen. Let us now open our hearts to God on this feast of St. Rose de Lima, asking St. Rose de Lima to intercede for us and asking God to hear our prayer for our country, for our society, for our people, for our nation.
Your response is, as we follow you daily.
As we follow you daily.
For those in the church who suffer for their faith, may they unite their trials and persecutions with the passion of their Lord and Savior and be witnesses to the world that the power of faith overcomes the pain of suffering. Lord, hear our prayer.
As we follow you daily.
For leaders of Christian movements in hostile, atheistic nations, may they experience deep inner peace of soul and a clear testimony of conscience in order to live out their discipleship of Christ. Lord, hear our prayer.
As we follow you daily.
For those who are confined to bed because of illness, may they see their confinement to a sick room as a sharing with Jesus nailed to a cross, and may their thoughts be centered on him in the glory of his resurrection. Lord, hear our and live in peace. Lord, hear our prayer.
As we follow you daily.
We pray with Mary, Mother of the crucified Lord. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, pray for us sinners. Pray for us now sinners, and at the hour of our death. And at the hour of our death. Amen. In the silence of our hearts. In the silence of our hearts. We make our private petitions. We make our private petitions. Lord, hear our prayer
as we follow you daily. Today we want to pray especially for all the persons who are named Rose, like Rose Overton and Miss Rosemary Cooper, whose birthday it is. We pray for all the La Rose and La Margaret persons. Today we ask you, Lord, to bless them in the manner in which they need your blessing. For this we pray, Lord, hear our prayer as we follow you daily. Father, hear our prayers today for our country, for our people, for our nation. Father, you hear the cries that arise from the hearts, the bleeding hearts of parents who've lost their sons and daughters through tragic accidents or criminal activity. We know you always hear our prayer. Look with mercy upon us, Lord God. Look with mercy upon the people of Haiti and the United States and the people of Pakistan, wherever there are devastating floods and natural disasters, Lord. Look with mercy upon them. And look with mercy upon us as we struggle with COVID in our region, our island. Hear our prayers, Lord. Grant those petitions that you see we need most. Through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Please sit. Our hymn for collection is, "The Lord Loves a Cheerful Giver."
The Lord loves a cheerful giver, give it with love, give it with love, give it with love. The Lord loves a cheerful giver, give it with love. Praise the Lord, blessing, give it with love. Give it with love, give it with love. You will receive a blessing, give it with love. Praise the Lord, and give it with love. Ask and you shall receive, or give it with love. Give it with love, give it with love. Ask and you shall receive, or give it with love. Praise the Lord, and give it with love. The Lord loves a cheerful giver, give it with love. Give it with love, give it with love. The Lord loves a cheerful giver, give it with love. Praise the Lord, and give it with love. Ask and you shall receive, oh, give it with love. Give it with love, give it with love. Ask and you shall receive, oh, give it with love. Praise the Lord, and give it with love. You will receive a blessing, give it with love. Give it with love, give it with love. You will receive a blessing, give it with love. Praise the Lord, and give it with love.
Pray, friends, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God the Almighty Father.
Accept the sacrifice at your hands,
For the praise and glory of his name, for our good and
the good of all his. Please stand.
Let us pray. May the sacred offering, O Lord, confer on us always the blessing of salvation, that what it celebrates in mystery, it may accomplish in power through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
and with your spirit.
Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right and just.
It is truly right and just, our duty and our salvation, always and everywhere to give you thanks, Lord, Holy Father, Almighty and eternal God. For you laid the foundations of the world and have arranged the changing of times and seasons. You formed man in your own image and set humanity over the whole world in all its wonder, to rule in your name over all you have made, and forever praise you in your mighty works through Christ our Lord. And so with all the angels we praise you, as in joyful celebration we acclaim.
Hosanna,
Hosanna.
Hosanna, 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 Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Holy, holy, holy Lord, Lord God of hosts, heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna in the highest.
Please kneel.
You are indeed holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts, we pray. By sending down your Spirit upon them, let the dew fall, so that they may become for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time he was betrayed and entered willingly into his passion, he took bread and giving thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you." In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it, for this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me." A mystery of faith.
Save us, Savior of the world, for by your cross and resurrection, you have set us free.
Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation. giving thanks that you've held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that partaking of the body and blood of Christ may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity. Together Francis, our Pope, Robert, our Bishop, the College of Bishops of the Caribbean region and of the world, the clergy, religious, seminarians, lay leaders, parents, children, all of us who form your family, especially those whose intention this Mass has been offered today. Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Pause for a moment to call to mind the memory of our loved ones who passed away, our parents, our spouses, our children, our siblings, relatives, and friends. We spare thought for those who have died recently in this country from criminal activity or accidents or natural causes. For those who may be dying at this very moment of Eucharist, or have already died this morning, or may die before the day's ended. Lord, be with those who are dying, and grant eternal rest especially to the forgotten souls in purgatory. Today we remember all of our cultural activists like Cécile Descartes and Florita Marquis and Joyce Auguste and Wowo and all the others who've died. Mike Overton, we ask the Lord to grant them the reward for their efforts. Have mercy on us all, we pray, that with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, St. Joseph, her spouse, with the blessed apostles, the glorious martyrs, St. Lucy, St. Rose of Lima, St. Margaret Mary Alacoque, and all the saints who please you throughout the ages, we may merit to be co-heirs to eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, Jesus Christ. Through him and with him and in him, O God, Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever.
Please stand.
At the Savior's command, and formed by divine teaching, we dare to sing.
Our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy, we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as you await the blessed hope and the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever. Our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you," look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant her peace and unity in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you always.
Let us offer each other a sign of peace.
Love of God, you take away the sins of the world. Jesus, Lamb of God, have mercy on us. Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. Jesus, Lamb of God, have mercy on us. Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy. Lamb of God, you take away the sins of the world. Jesus, Lamb of God, grant us peace. Grant us peace. Grant us peace. Grant us peace. Grant us peace.
Please kneel.
Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sin of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb.
Our song for communion is Santo, Santo, Santo.
mi corazón te adora, mi corazón te sabe decir, Santo eres, Señor. Holy, 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 my heart adores you. My heart knows how to say to you, holy are you, Lord. Santo, 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 my corazón te adora, mi corazón te sabe decir, Santo eres, Señor. Holy are you, Lord. Santo eres, Señor.
Please
Let us pray. Renewed by this bread from the heavenly table, we beseech you, O Lord, that being the food of charity, it may confirm our hearts and stir us to serve you in our neighbor. Through Christ our Lord.
Please sit for the second collection and the notices. Notices for the week 30th August to 5th September 2020. Parishioners are invited to devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary on Monday 31st August at 5 p.m. at the Cathedral. There will be devotion to the Precious Blood on Tuesday 1st September at the Cathedral at 12:30 p.m. Parishioners are invited to Hour of Grace and Mercy on Thursday 3rd September at 5 p.m. at the Cathedral. Parishioners are advised that confessions will take place every Saturday between 9:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. Please take note. All Sacred Heart Confraternity members are informed that First Sunday Mass on 6 September is at 6 a.m. and members are asked to attend and to be dressed in full uniform. Our next healing service will take place on Monday 7 September at 6 p.m. at the Cathedral. Copy of a prayer is being circulated, which will be prayed at the service. Please take a copy. Parents, please note that for year-free confirmation, classes will resume on Saturday the 5th September at 9:30 a.m. at the cathedral. This will take the form of a meeting with parents and candidates. At that meeting, the way forward will be outlined. Please make a very special effort to be present and punctual. So I repeat, year-free confirmation classes will resume on Saturday, 5th September at 9:30 a.m. at the cathedral. It will take the form of a meeting with parents and candidates. So please make a special effort to be present and punctual. Thank you. Registration for First Communion and Confirmation Year 1 classes is now open. Forms are available from the parish office. Year 2 classes for First Communion and Confirmation will resume in mid-September. Further updates for years 1 and 2 will be provided with regards to times, dates, and venue. The parish wishes to thank all persons who have volunteered their service in the cleaning of our parish church every Saturday. Your efforts are appreciated. Here ends our notices.
Good morning, sisters and brothers. Assembly 2020 will be held November 12th to 15th. Assembly 2020 is our opportunity to come together as church to map a course under the guidance of the Holy Spirit that will provide us with an integrated archdiocesan pastoral plan. In other words, we're aiming for a plan and the vision and a plan for the vision and direction of our church for the next 5 years. You are being asked to participate in the assembly. It's a virtual assembly, and it's important that you have access to the parish bulletin for something that is extremely important to the assembly. That's a survey. The parish bulletin is available electronically. If you provide your email address to Ms. Patricia at the parish office, you will surely receive the bulletin electronically. There is a link on the bulletin when you receive it electronically. When you click on it, it will take you to the page where you can do the survey, answer the questions in the questionnaire, and that's the survey. If you somehow have a hard copy, you would have to type out the entire link in your browser in order to access it. Everyone is encouraged to participate in the survey. Everyone. However, if you still feel challenged, we have came up with a plan to further assist. On a designated day in this month of September, some of the youth, some of whom have volunteered already, we're hoping others will come on board, will be in this cathedral parish church. They will be seated up front with their laptops, tablets, or cell phone. And on that day, parishioners who come in, one at a time, can approach those sitting in front to give their responses to the questions. When it is completed, the one assisting you will click the send button and the survey will be delivered. There will be no hard copies. Everything is being done electronically because it makes tabulation electronically. It'll be done very quickly. So don't feel left out. You would have that opportunity. Amen? And lastly, I would say, for those of you who have graciously donated monies to assist the parish in buying food so that we can give hampers to the poor, your monies allowed us to buy food to complement what we receive from Caritas. We have hampers available. If you come to the parish office Monday, Wednesday, or Friday because you know of someone who is very much in need of assistance, with that food hamper, please come in. And if I'm not there, you can ask for Deacon Peter Favrier. He will be happy to assist you with getting one of those hampers. It's not a lot. It's kind of like first come, first serve. So if you really think this person is in need and you want to help, here is a wonderful opportunity to do so. And for those of you who have given monies to assist the parish in making this these hampers available, I thank you most sincerely.
Those who are celebrating today, birthdays and so forth, anniversaries of baptism and First Communion, we won't ask you to come up because we are maintaining the social distancing, but we'll just ask you to just stand in your place as we pray for you. Those who are celebrating today, birthdays, baptism anniversaries, First Communion, wedding anniversaries, could you stand? We have one little girl, we have two, three, okay. Church, let us pray for them. Our help is in the name of the Lord. O Lord, hear my prayer. The Lord be with you. Father, we thank you on this feast of St. Rose of Lima for your daughters as they celebrate these milestones in their Christian life. You created them out of the dust of the earth and renewed them through baptism. Lord, continue to give them joy in their faith, love of the sacraments. Protect them and their family and loved ones from all forms of disease, especially COVID and dengue, and those that are confronting us now, Lord God. Protect them as they prepare to return to school, Lord God. Bless their families and loved ones. Make this prayer to you, Father, through your Son, Jesus, union of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord let the light of his countenance shine upon you. May the Lord bless you, filling with his peace. May the blessed mighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down upon you and remain with you forever and ever. Let us all stand for the final blessing. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Go and announce the gospel of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Vive la hausse, my lovers. Vive la hausse encore.
Wait. One final notice and reminder, the junior choir youth will be serving soup to the poor on Fridays, this coming Friday at the presbytery, the garage of the presbytery.
Jouez musiciens, jouez by la voix, chantez la voix, la voix en oui. Jouez musiciens, jouez by la voix, chantez la voix en oui. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous was nous glorieux. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous was nous glorieux. La was c'est un bel joli fleur.
I la was.
L'hymne quand joue quand on souhaite.
I la was.
La was qui belle ti fleur nous ni.
I la was.
Ni non plus nous c'est la was.
I la was.
La gloire, la gloire, la gloire, nous was nous glory. I la was.
La gloire, la gloire,
La gloire, nous was nous glory. Jouez by la was, and la was en people. Jouez musiciens, jouez by la was, Chantez la was, kay la was, nambe. La gloire, la gloire, la gloire. Nous was, nous glorie.
La gloire, la gloire, la gloire. Nous was, nous glorie.
Vive la was, my la was.
Vive la was.
Vive la was encore.
Vive la was.
Vive la was.